In this episode of CARPe Diem.
Assisted death became legal in Canada June 2016. Since then, what's changed? And what more needs to be done?
CARPe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome. Before we discuss today's topic, let's take a look at this week's Zippy Zoomer with videographer Leah Bolton.
Usually bring that out with you everywhere?
No, but for this show we do.
With 69 years of entertainment under her belt, let's introduce this week's Zippy Zoomer, Susie.
About cooking something up with me. You want to have a bit of fun, come and join us. Okay. We love doing this. I love getting kids involved and people as well. And it's not easy when you're thrown in somewhere and you've got recorded music. So you try and improvise. Okay, boys and girls, are you ready for some fun? Yeah! No, I said, are you ready for some fun? Yeah! We do a lot of senior shows. We go to hospitals, residences. We go wherever they want us. We've done theater work. We've done conventions. We do shows for Legions. We do shows all over the place, yeah. He looks so much like my boyfriend. There was a little girl wanted to meet the horse. Did she come over and meet you?
Yes, we introduced
Oh, good.
our horses to lots of kids.
Oh, good.
And they wanted to pat her.
Oh,
Yeah.
and how about him? He got patted too?
How is it working with her?
Well, which is wonderful. She's like a daughter.
Oh, yes, I wonder. When the roll is called up yonder, will the angels...
Don't you get tired?
No, it's fun. It really is fun. I enjoy myself tremendously.
And besides the theater, any other crazy things you're doing these days?
I make toys.
What? Here we go, got my hat on for Back in the Saddle again. Gonna join these ladies. If you have a Zoomer to nominate, don't forget to nominate them at zippyzoomer@carp.ca. Yeehaw!
Wonderful. We should all be so lucky to age that way, right, Ellen?
Absolutely.
All healthy and full of life?
If we were that lucky.
It just shows the importance of social inclusion and how much it matters that people of whatever age have opportunity to be in community.
We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to ask the question, do people have the right to choose when they die? First, this is what you said.
I would like to be able to choose my time and my way of death.
The people who has terminal illness or problems like that, they should have the right to die.
Absolutely. My brother chose the program, the MAID program last year, so I really believe strongly that we have the right to choose.
CARPe Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
In this segment, we set up the issue of dying with dignity. Let's go around the table and hear the panel's first thoughts. Howard, why is it so important?
Well, I think that it's a fight that was a long time coming, and I have a personal experience with a wife who suffered for 30 years with progressive multiple sclerosis, who had essentially lost all of the quality of life that she cherished so much during her very vital lifetime. And she chose the right to die, and it was a long fight for her to get that right.
I've spent the last 2.5 years providing assisted death for people, and it's been such a privilege. I spent 40 years before that as a family doctor, so I've seen the other kinds of deaths, and I'm so glad that we live in Canada, that we can provide for people and allow them to choose what they want at the end.
You know, autonomy is the foundation of our healthcare system, and where is that more important than when it comes literally to matters of life and death? And I'm really happy to say that our CARPe members, just like the general public, agree with me. 83% of the general public, 83% of our CARPe members support the right for assisted dying, and those numbers are even higher when we take out the people that say, I don't know.
Let's take a look at a short video made in 2015 when John Thornton, our colleague at Zoomer Media, followed a friend who had to go to Switzerland to end her life. This was before the laws allowed for assisted dying in Canada. Videographer Dean Atwell takes a look at the issue.
I have trouble breathing and I don't want to live. I just feel that I just want to stop it. I find it exhausting.
That's a quick one about.
If I'm terminally ill and there is no cure, then there should be nobody to force me to live on in suffering conditions.
The quality of my life is, I would rate as 0.
Close to 80% of Canadians feel that at that final moment in their life, if the pain is unbearable, if the dignity is gone, if the individual is compos mentis, that last measure of autonomy has to rest with us.
The church cannot be participating in taking a life. You know, the Catholic Church built hospitals as a result of a society that didn't show adequate care through centuries and millennium. The church has built hospitals because society was not caring for people. We're not about to start changing that whole ethos.
Dr. Wiebe, how do you feel about the Archdiocese saying that they don't want to participate?
It's not their lives.
I know there was some media coverage of you. What did they say, that you snuck into a facility?
When people go into a care home, it is their home. And when they decide that it's time to have an assisted death because the natural death is taking too long, and I always ask them, where would you like to die? When would you like to die? Who do you want to invite to the event? And that particular man, Barry Hyman, said he wanted to die at home.
I understand there was a bit of flack that you received from the care facility.
But not from him or his family.
And Howard, you have an opinion on that?
I do have an opinion on that because the fact is my wife Elaine, who was a nurse by training, worked for 15 years as a palliative care volunteer and saw people in palliative care and the suffering not only of the patients but of the families waiting for people to die, people who would have perhaps, had they had the opportunity, chosen a physician-assisted death.
I'd like to talk about what has changed since the beginning, because at the beginning, before C-14, there was those months where we had to go through court for each case. Then C-14 came and we had all these extra rules that we didn't have. 2 independent witnesses, 2 clinicians, a nurse practitioner or a doctor, and 10-day waiting periods, and lots of paperwork.
We have a really interesting situation here because we had this Supreme Court case that said if you are suffering irremediably, you have a grievous condition, that you are eligible to die, to ask for assistance to die. There was no reference in that court case whatsoever to imminent death. When the federal government brought in legislation, they inserted that condition, that death be imminent. So what we're really seeing is over time, what's happening in practice is getting closer to what that court case envisioned.
My point is the people who are left by the wayside, who do not qualify because they are not on a road to a reasonably foreseeable death, and the dilemma that creates for doctors.
Right. So the dilemmas, first of all, are the ones we have to refuse. Everybody I've talked to says that refusing a person from aid is the hardest thing about this. So you know, when I looked at what did natural death in the foreseeable future mean for my assessments of my patients, I sort of thought at first I would follow what I called the Carter criteria, not the Carter law, the decision, but the Carter criteria, which was that an 89-year-old with spinal stenosis was eligible, and an 89-year-old without a terminal disease, she didn't have one, has about a 5-year life expectancy. So I was taking that as my guideline. But then after AB versus Canada decision, which was a 77-year-old woman with severe arthritis, who the judge said had a natural death in the foreseeable future, well, a 77-year-old without a terminal illness has about a 10-year life expectancy. So that meant, Howard, that I could actually extend to people who weren't terminal. And also the Health Canada site says specifically that people with non-terminal illnesses are eligible, can be eligible rather. And so I have been able to provide for people who are suffering terribly from progressive, awful diseases.
Mike, would Elaine have qualified under the new criteria?
Yes.
You think so?
Well, I don't think so.
I doubt that.
I
really
I would have accepted her. And the reasons I would have accepted Elaine is that at the point that I met her, she was quadriplegic, meaning that she was paralyzed or weak in all 4 limbs. And multiple sclerosis also weakens diaphragm for breathing and chest muscles. And what happens in that situation is that people die of infection. They die of lung infection, they die of kidney infection. And they do this because their muscles aren't strong enough to fight off these infections. Now, if with excellent medical care, you can live quite a long time. If you choose not to accept all of that medical care, such as if you get a chest infection, you must not just get antibiotics, you must go into a hospital with intensive care to help you breathe because you're not breathing well enough to fight off a pneumonia. And so that means that her natural death would have been foreseeable under that criteria, and I would have accepted her, but probably not until after the AB versus Canada decision, which was 2017.
We don't know whether that decision will ultimately stand as a precedent.
Has it been appealed, that decision, the
No,
AB versus
it is
Canada?
not appealed.
Well then, so then doesn't it stand?
It does until another case comes along, refuses to follow it, and then it goes up to the Court of Appeal and then the Supreme Court of Canada if they'll listen to it.
Gotcha.
We hope that the current challenge to the new legislation, the Lamb case, is going to ultimately clarify this issue.
In the next segment, we'll talk about advanced care requests. But first, here's what you have to say about that.
I think it's a good planning tool that will suit some people. Obviously, it's not going to be something that everybody wants to do, but again, it's an option that I believe people should have.
CARPE Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome back. Before the break, we briefly touched on advanced care requests. In this segment, let's keep talking about access now. Dr. Weeb, what does this mean to a patient, a person who is just wanting to reach out to find out what her or his options are?
First of all, they have to fill in a form requesting medical assistance in dying, and this has to be witnessed by 2 independent witnesses. So this is a barrier for some people, because some people, by the time they're ready to ask for an assisted death, are either so old that they have outlived everybody except their family members and their caregivers, who are restricted and not allowed to be witnesses, and therefore that has been a problem.
We have to get rid of the stigma associated with this process.
Well, and it's interesting, Ellen, there's no other procedure that I would want, diagnostic tests, where I would have to have people witness that I want it.
Yes, exactly. Then after the form has been done, 2 assessments must be done by a nurse practitioner or doctor. And this can be the treating doctor, the family doctor, but often they don't want to actually put their names on these forms. So then it goes to one of the sort of specialists like me, and in my case, the MAID Coordinating Center of the Health Authority would contact me and say, we've got a patient in such and such a ward or at home who needs an assessment and needs a provider. And so these assessments are done, and our job as an assessor is to go through the list of all the requirements, the easy ones like are they over 18 years old, and the hard ones like is the natural death within the foreseeable future, or do they have the capacity to make the decision? Yes.
And there's another big question, what about patients with dementia? Watch the arguments for and against in this clip from a news outlet in Australia.
To me, dementia is no different to any other serious illness, in the sense of having a choice as to how you want to handle it. It's like someone who has advanced cancer or advanced motor neurone disease. Why should they be forced to go on to the very bitter end of that disease if they prefer to have a quicker exit from this world? I'd like to be kind of in charge of my own destiny. I mean, I didn't ask to come into this world, but I want to kind of be certain that when I leave this world, I do it in a certain degree of control, of style almost.
If you change the law to allow euthanasia, then inevitably you place pressure on vulnerable people, and people with dementia are amongst the very most vulnerable in our society, so easily coerced and abused. And the other thing is that people tend to make decisions very differently when they're well than when they're ill. Many people with dementia are quite happy in their little world. Some of them suffer anxiety or have personality difficulties. Some of them life is not easy, but many of them are quite happy.
You wanted to talk about that.
I do. So just because you have dementia does not mean you don't have a capacity to make decisions. And I have been able to help people with dementia because they had the basic capacity. Doesn't mean that they knew who the Prime Minister of Canada was. It doesn't mean that they knew what day of the week it was. But what they did know was that they were sick and were not getting better. That they had a choice between death that was quick and peaceful versus a prolonged one in the future, which they refuse. And so it's not that hard to figure out that somebody understands this and that they're requesting an assisted death and are able to understand what they're requesting.
But the problem is, while people have the capacity, they may not be on that rapid trajectory that some doctors probably assume is required.
So what I learned in the Netherlands from experts there on dementia and assisted death was 10 minutes to midnight. Yes. And what they mean is that you have a diagnosis of dementia, you have a trajectory that we know that this is going to get worse and worse and lead to your death. And at one point, you still have capacity, but you're near losing capacity. That's 10 minutes to midnight, and we have to find that for you. And I have been able to do this for several patients, and what I have to do at that point is to say to them, it's now or never. Oh. Which is very hard.
Goodness, that just sends chills. We're going to take a short break, but first, what do you think about dementia and assisted death?
I think people should have that option, and so if a person has dementia and can't deal with the end of life, I think that's an error. They need to have that option. It's their choice.
CARPE Diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
It's now time to go around the table for our panel's final thoughts on our right to die. Howard, we'll start with you.
Yes, I wish there were